Hello and welcome to World History B, Unit 9, Communist China. So to be clear, the fall of the Soviet Union, while definitely a blow to the success of communism, certainly didn't kill it. And into the early decades of the 21st century, communism still exists in a number of countries, most significantly China, one of the world's greatest economic powers, providing a strong contrast between the failure of the Soviet Union and the meteoric rise of China. So you might remember that Mao Zedong was the leader of the Communist Revolution in all of China following the Civil War in China. And his premier was a man named Zhou Enlai. And he helped establish order after the failure of the Cultural Revolution. But he also worried about China's isolation because Mao Zedong didn't want to have any influence from outside of China coming into China. But Zhou realized if they were going to avoid making the same mistakes as the Soviet Union, China was going to have to figure out how to have peaceful economic relations with the Western nations, the United States in particular. So Zhou sent a message to the world that China was now open to new relationships, whether you were communist or not. Because unlike the Soviet Union, China really wasn't all that interested in whether or not other countries were going communist or not. They were just interested in making it work for themselves. And so they were open to having peaceful relationships with a variety of nations, regardless of their economic system. And to prove this, in 1971, he invited the American table tennis team, Ping Pong, to tour China. This was the first time Americans were allowed into China since 1949. And in 1972, just a year later, Zhou and Mao met with U.S. President Nixon to finally re-establish diplomatic relations between the United States and China, all because of ping pong. After the death of both Zhou and Mao in 1976, Mao was succeeded by Deng Xiaoping. Deng moved away from some of Mao's communist policies, opening up China to the influence of capitalism and a free market, because he realized what the Soviet Union was unwilling to, and that there was serious economic flaws in the communist policies. Some free market ideas had to be allowed in to counteract many of the inefficiencies and some of the corrupting influences that a communist nation often has. So Deng's vision of how China's economy was supposed to be evolving can be summarized under his four modernizations: agriculture, science and technology, defense, and industry. He eliminated all the communes that Mao created and began to lease the land to individual farmers, allowing them to earn profit from their sales of their crops. So now they had a reason to work hard other than just to benefit the rest of the country, because now farmers could earn for themselves. The more they produced, the harder they worked, the bigger the potential profit they could make, something that would be impossible under a strict communist economy as was seen in the former Soviet Union. And it was very successful. This new incentive to work hard caused food production to increase by 50%. But not everyone profited equally under Deng Xiaoping. In fact, many accused the government of using their positions for personal profit, and while Deng Xiaoping was open to many economic policies from the West, he was very similar when it came to more social policies, freedoms. He was very similar to his Soviet brothers. In 1989, more than 100,000 students occupied Tiananmen Square in Beijing, demanding democracy. Because despite all the reforms and changes that Deng had brought, the one thing that people craved most that he refused to give was freedom and choice. Now, if you remember, 1989, many revolutions were going on in Europe, and Deng Xiaoping was worried that his country would be the next to fall. So he immediately declared martial law over the entire country and began to crack down on the dissidents. 100,000 soldiers were ordered to surround the city of Beijing. After that, most students left, but about 5,000 stayed, refusing to give up Tiananmen Square, continuing to demand for democracy now. And unfortunately, those that stayed were assaulted by the soldiers, 100,000 against 5,000, killing hundreds and wounding thousands. And unfortunately, to this very day, protest, rebellion, freedom of speech, pretty much anyone or anything that goes against the Chinese government is dealt with very harshly and often without trial. And that's all the time we have today. If you have any questions, please let me know in class. Thank you.